Well, today we have a treat for you. Our very own Jake Lyons is going to share about will AI run nonprofits of the future, decentralized autonomous organizations, and what they mean for the nonprofit world. Jake, your expertise, over to you.
All right. This one should be a fun one today, and is kind of in conjunction with the crypto workshop, which we did a couple weeks ago. This is like some of the stuff that we wanted to include but couldn't include. We needed an extra 15 minutes to do it. So if you're watching the recording of this, you obviously like recordings because you're watching a recording. So go watch that recording first, and you get a little bit of context for this one. Should be an interesting one for sure. So first, go to the first slide here. Just want to talk about what these are. So this entire forum, the next 10 plus minutes, we're going to be kind of chatting through what are DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. It's a really cool new thing that's happening kind of on the coattails of crypto and the blockchain, and the technology that is used to make those things work is being extended in some cases to run entire companies. So having basically AI run a company instead of human leadership. This is not something out of a science fiction novel. This is actually happening and has over the last 18, 24 months, really is where we've kind of seen the growth of this kind of coming out of the crypto boom. So talk through what this is. So if you know nothing about this, hopefully at the end of this quick session here, you'll understand what this is and kind of be prepared for when Skynet takes over the world. Should be pretty cool. So a decentralized autonomous organization is just a legal structure for an organization. It's just an assignment or a name given to an organization that has no governing body. It's a totally decentralized, does not belong to a government, doesn't belong to a specific state. It's just a company that is spread out and is owned by the people. It is able to do this because it runs on the same technology as cryptocurrencies and NFTs, which is this unhackable system of computer networks, thousands, sometimes millions of computers all connected. So if you wanted to try to hack into and steal information, you'd have to hack into thousands of computers at once, which we can't currently do. So very, very secure, very, very safe, and allowing you to have a true democracy when it comes to decision-making for an organization. If there's not a leadership, how do they make decisions on how to steer the company? All decisions are made by straight up popular vote by token holders or for anyone who owns any share of the company. Used to be, even not that long ago, that democracy is everyone gets a vote on decision making, but that's ridiculous because we don't have time to vote on every decision. So we elect individuals who are supposed to represent our interest, and they vote on every decision that we make. That's how government works. That's how a true democracy is set up, or technically a republic. But that's how democracy is supposed to work, is popular vote. Popular vote for a person, they make decisions. This is kind of cutting out the middleman on that. This is popular vote on decisions. And the reason we're able to do this is because we have this technology that connects us instantly, whereas even 20 years ago, this was not possible. All governing activity for that organization is posted publicly on the blockchain, which is just the massive ledger that is shared across all computers for ultimate transparency in decision-making. Very, very cool. Next slide, please. So how does this work? So as you purchase shares of the company, the more shares or tokens of the company, and whoever sets up the company can decide how many total tokens there are, just like shares of stock. The more of those you own, the more votes you get on every decision. So if you own 33% of the company, you get 33% of the vote on every single decision that happens day to day. And if the other 2/3 disagree with you, they can totally change and go totally against what you're saying. So if you want to have more say in what you're saying, you just buy more tokens. It's straight up dollars for decision rights. Based on the decision the humans make on each vote, a computer then takes that information and makes an actual recommendation based on what it thinks will be the best thing to support that outcome. And I'll have an example for this. Computer asks you, hey, what do you want to do with this? Everyone votes on what they think. One-on-one, you can do it anonymously even. Computer says, great, everyone collectively voted to do X, Y, and Z. Here's the recommendation that I'm making and sending out to all the employees to execute on. For example, next slide. Imagine there is a DAO grapes company. This is just a way to make it kind of think about it as a physical example. So just to make the math easy, say the fiscal year ends and there is $100,000 surplus. We have $100,000 left in the budget. So the computer notices this and says, hey, we made $100,000 this fiscal year, sends out a message to say, we'll say that there's exactly 1,000 people or 1,000 total tokens It says, hey, we have X money left over. How do you want to spend it? We could bonus everybody. We can plant more grapes. We can research a faster way to ship grapes. These all cost money. How do you want to spend the money? The majority of the voters think, divvying up is not going to be much. That's like $100 a person. I don't really want that bonus. I'd rather grow the company and get more later. So let's just use it to plant more grapes. And everyone votes, or the majority of the 1,000 tokens, the majority of the 1,000 people, or the 500 people who own a combination of 1,000 tokens say, yes, we vote for more grapes. Then they're done. There's no more leadership or executive decision to be made. At that point, the AI says, okay, great. Based on that decision, I'm going to send out a message to all the managers and the employees responsible for planting grapes and say, now you have $100,000 in your budget to get supplies and labor to plant more grapes. Here are my recommendations on how to do that. So instead of having to figure out how to distribute that and move, you as an owner vote on the one decision, and then that goes into the computer. Algorithm AI figures out how to do it, sends out a message as the boss of the organization, and makes a recommendation how to move forward. All the people have to do is vote, and the computer handles the rest. And maybe there's like a final review system in place where like, this is our recommendation, is this cool, or whatever, yes or no. So maybe there's one more layer of voting just to make sure that nothing weird happens. But for the most part, it's pretty hands-off. Next slide. So what's the point of this? This all seems silly. What does this actually accomplish? The first thing is true democracy, so that everyone who has a stake in that company truly gets to vote on every single thing that happens in that company if they want to. And there are time parameters put on this, say, hey, this is a 3-day vote. If you don't vote, your vote doesn't count. We just count the votes that are in. So you're not getting held up if someone just doesn't decide to vote. But it is true democracy. If you want to have your voice truly heard and weighed in on every decision that company makes, you can have that happen. Ultimate transparency of decision making. So every single decision that's made and the vote percentage that goes up there goes on one giant ledger that anyone can go and look at and say, hey, okay, we were deciding if we wanted to give everybody a raise or to reinvest it in the company and hopefully increase salaries in 3 years. Well, we can see on here that 40% wanted to do this, and 35 wanted this, and 5 wanted this, and then the computer recommended this, and this is how we're doing. And you can go back and review those things as opposed to leadership behind closed doors making decisions, and we hope for the best. This is supposed to implement the true will of the stakeholders, not just the leadership. And you're supposed to get buy-in and interest from everyone who has a token as a result. It's like the true voice of collectivism, or kind of the opposite of libertarianism, feeling of belonging, all voices matter, that kind of thing. The other hopefully added bonus to this is you're not having to pay leadership salaries, no admin overhead. That's all just handled by the computer who does it all. So that is not a giant expense in most companies, but it's a large expense. People at the top of Fortune 500 companies make quite a lot of money, and that's one expense that's eliminated entirely. There's no upper level management at all. Next slide. So what are the issues? There's obviously like, okay, this seems a little weird, too good to be true. What are some of the problems that we actually see with this? So it takes obviously substantial technical expertise to implement. You have to have someone who's an absolute expert in the technical programming side of blockchain technology to even set it up in the first place. That's why the majorities that we're seeing right now are companies that actually manage crypto assets, because it's very easy to kind of marry those things. And you already have those people who know those things working for it and can already in that space. So we're not seeing, beverage companies like this yet. But as the technology becomes a little easier to implement, that will slowly change. Right now, we're like less than 2 years in from this even being a thing. It only works in the digital space for now. So we don't have a way that we can effectively, or no one's really taken the leap on doing this effectively with physical goods. This is also projected to change over the next 10 years, but it again requires a lot of technical expertise, and everyone has to be pretty well versed in the system itself and the interfacing with the technology. It can be pretty inefficient in decision making. So you even have to make a small decision, and the computer almost always will ask for a vote on almost anything, and will give 48 hours. So even like every tiny little decision that's made, if the computer doesn't feel like it can just execute on it, or if it feels like there's going to be too many different outcomes, it'll automatically just push out that vote. And you have to wait 48 hours for people to weigh in. And as a result of that, a ton of information in great detail has to be disseminated to everyone, summarizing the problem and the question that's actually being posed. So instead of the leadership getting kind of here's a report from the group and we're going to talk about this and we have an hour to decide and we got to decide by Friday afternoon, it's okay, now we have to send out, and someone has to make this very carefully crafted message that's digestible in a variety of education levels, backgrounds. There's people all over the world, so we have to have it in 16 languages, and every single decision has to be translated in that way so that it can come back with good information. So it's very slow right now. There's not a good process for doing this. The other problem in terms of people buying into this kind of organization for profit is as people buy more stock, your stock actually goes down. So as people are buying into the percentage of the company, your vote in the company diminishes, as opposed to venture capital where you're saying, I'll give you $100,000 for this percent stake. And as the company grows, my assets grow. As the company grows, your assets actually diminish unless the company is profitable past that point. So it's not highly incentivized to buy into one unless you're kind of in the ground floor of like, we're starting this, we're not going to have new people buy in. So it's very difficult to get venture capital because people are less incentivized than a regular traditional business to do that. Also, as you'd imagine, there's a lot of legal issues with this. The government hasn't really caught up with how to regulate this yet. Trying to explain to the Senate how this even works would be a nightmare. And trying to explain to all the people who have no idea how to log into their AOL account how this technology works, we're just not there yet. The decision-making power and the ability to be able to distribute that information is just not in a position where we could do that until we have younger government or government that's been exposed to this technology for more decades. There are a few states that are legal to do this, like Wyoming, of all places. You can set up a DAO legally and it's all protected, but most states, not the case. So a lot of issues. We're not quite there yet. This is kind of something that we see on the horizon. But why does this apply to nonprofits? I'm glad you asked. So there are nonprofit versions of these that are popping up as well. So it's not just a for-profit thing saying, wouldn't it be great if truly every dollar donated to my organization went directly to the cause? We didn't have to have staff or leadership or decision-making. It was just volunteers run everything. The AI helps make it, and then our donors get to vote on how the organization is run. This is the theory on how this is going to happen. This is less than a year that this has been kind of starting off. Like we're, I think, 8 or 9 months into the first few of these beginning to exist. So the donors are the voters, functions like a foundation with a minimum annual giving, saying if I'm on the board or if I'm a token holder, I contractually agree to give $10,000 a year to this organization. And as a result, I get this much decision-making power. I get this many tokens of the total. I get that much percentage of wherever those funds are distributed. I'm not getting paid because it's a nonprofit, but it functions kind of like a minimum annual giving board. Like some boards have like $1,000 minimum, but then they get to make decisions on how the organization runs. It's that same concept, just largely scaled up. The more you give, in theory, the more voting power you have to direct those funds. So if you're giving big gifts into this donor advised fund that's run by a DAO, you should have more say in where it goes. It's not a perfect system yet, but the idea is that our biggest donors get to direct those funds the most. There's no executive leadership at all, just voting on desired outcomes. So if you're a donor, you get to vote on where you want the money to have impact, and then the AI helps kind of decide the best course of action and gives directive to the managers and volunteers or whatever staff that you have. This currently only exists on online currency, digital assets, and are used as ways to fund other nonprofits. Like they'll form a DAO that is essentially just a foundation, and then that foundation will support other projects or other nonprofits with just giving them grants. It's how it's set up currently. Again, this is like less than a year ago that people even started doing this with nonprofits. Next slide. One of the ones that is most significant that's under kind of this, we're trying this out, is the Big Green DAO, which funds the Big Green organization, which is one of the Musk family foundations that works on like sustainable farming and that kind of thing. They kind of went all in with like 6- and 7-figure gifts to this and saying, hey, is this something that can work? So this is not Elon specifically, but I think it's like his sister and one of their cousins or something. It's someone in the Musk family with a lot of money saying, we're just going to try this out. They started it last year, kind of later in the year. I think it was like November 21. So like less than a year ago. And then it's set to end in September of this year. So in a couple months from now. And then the Musk will say, okay, this is proof of concept. This was a terrible idea. This was not a good idea. But all they've done is saying, we're going to invest money. We're going to ask others to do the same. The more money you invest, the more decision-making power that you have to direct these grants that we're giving out, $50,000 at a time. And then the AI helps us find where best to direct those dollars where we can actually make an impact. And we'll see what happens after about a year of doing this, and then we'll make an evaluation from there. So there's a lot of organizations who are like, okay, we don't want to get into the DAO or the crypto space yet, but we do want to see what happens with this Musk Foundation thing. So a lot of people are kind of just watching this going, okay, they're going to come out with something later this fall and kind of announce, we're shutting this project down. It was a bad idea, which may be the case. But because the technology is improving so fast and the ability to do this, and they're solving some of the problems that are inherent with this, we might see this begin to grow even more starting into next year. So a lot of it theoretical, but a really cool topic. We get asked about it, and definitely a cool part of the fundraising philanthropy crypto space. So before we wrap up here, wanted to see what anyone thinks. Do you think this is dumb? Do you think this is going to go away? Do you think this is something we're going to see more of in 10 years? Should we be concerned about this? I know that crypto is one of the most popular topics right now in the nonprofit space, but what about AI in addition to running currency and having all that digitized? What about having digital leadership? What does anybody think? Is this going to be a thing that we need to even worry about right now?
I guess this is Jeremy for Brem Prep. I'll jump in there. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I think it is something we'll see more, but I would think there might be a kind of hybridized approach, just with the inefficiency inherent in the decision process of one that decentralizes to an extent, in the near term, so that really, to me as a leader of an organization, right, I'm a little bit worried about my job. But more importantly, I think it's a way to say how in what way could this kind of software help with decision making to ensure that it represents the input of stakeholders. So I see a hybridized approach actually that really could inform strategic planning and inform our philanthropic communication and drive engagement. So I imagine there might be software that approximates some of that and provides a real value added, but lets leadership feel good that they're going to keep their job, at least for the near term.
Right. And what leadership are going to push for this and put themselves out of a job, especially for large nonprofits. They're not going to say, what we need to do, replace ourselves. It's not something that people are excited about. But I think you're totally right in that people will begin to use this as a bit of a tool and kind of like a larger, more complex version of a donor advised fund, saying, I'm not just going to put this into this fund and then 12 people get to decide where it goes. But everybody who buys in can help kind of collectively vote on where these funds are distributed. Maybe it stops at the financial thing, saying these are going to be financial institutions only. They're not actually distributing goods or managing, producing goods or services. It's just a way to aim money in the most ethical and transparent way possible. That's kind of what we're seeing. So we'll keep you posted. This is all very exciting stuff. I think it's super cool. I love nerding out about this stuff, but this is going to be a bigger and bigger deal as the technology gets better. We're less than a year into this. So 5 years from now, who knows?